Hi guys, this is Robin with Weight Loss Apocalypse. Here's another 10-minute clip from a session yesterday that I had with a client I've been working with for a few years now. She came to me after she had just regained like 50 pounds after losing weight with the HCG protocol. And however, she had done everything and was actually just coming off of like a ketogenic diet kick and didn't have sugar for like 6 years, was highly restrictive and obsessed about her weight, and but also living in an extremely stressful lifestyle because of the work that she does in agriculture. Anyways, and her father, lots of stress and anxiety, and she had gained 50 pounds and started having symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, and she's been very stressed about her health. And so she's, after working with me for a while, has had a lot of change, a lot of improvement, but sure, rheumatoid arthritis is still there and still inflamed. And we were talking about stress and its influence. So this clip, we're talking about the stress response. But I want to acknowledge that how her doctor responded to her last appointment. In her last appointment with the doctor, she was told that even if she's really hungry, she should not eat. Basically, her doctor suggesting she starve herself. And I want to address stigma from the medical community and what stigma is. Basically, stigma is a negative attachment to people who have extra weight or extra body fat as a personal problem, and how that affects the patient. There's a lot of research on stigma in the medical community and how it impacts the patient. And this is just a little bit. I'm going to show you some slides from this is a continued education seminar for people who are in the medical field. And just so that you know, people that experience stigma in the work environment, I don't know if you can see that, there we go, coping with weight stigma. Out of 2,400 some people, 79% after experiencing stigma turn to food to cope. It's a stressor, so it impacts your biology. Not only that, but when you experience weight bias, you don't necessarily question the person or the belief systems of the stigma. So how many people who actually experience stigma over their weight actually internalize it and believe it and carry shame associated with it? And the statistics of binge eating behavior going up is 3 times. You're 3 times more likely to binge after experiencing weight stigma. And that's what this is. Weight stigma and binge eating. How many of you have experienced weight stigma and binged right after going to a doctor's appointment? I'm trying to read it while I'm here. 3 times the amount. Healthcare holders holding stereotypes. I would just want you to see that, they assume that you're lazy, you're weak, unwilling. This is to me why that doctor would suggest that even if you're hungry, you should just not eat. And what I find actually really fascinating with this particular client that I'm talking to in this clip is she has done the HCG protocol multiple times, and the last few rounds she's actually done with my guidance. And her last round, she followed the protocol as Dr. Simeon's intended, lost weight, and during her round, her rheumatoid arthritis was incredibly inflamed. So how do you explain, if she's eating less than 500 calories of basically meat and vegetables, very little fruit and crackers, losing weight, how her rheumatoid arthritis could inflame? Why in that case would anybody assume that it's caused by food when she has a direct experience with the HCG protocol that shows it's not the food or her weight that's inflaming it? Oh my gosh. There's so much. It shows that people who experience weight bias in the medical field avoid getting help. They avoid going. They don't get medical treatment, which would be understandable. So people who have excess weight, which is again defined by thin supremacy, avoid getting health care, more likely to get cancer and have diseases because they are they're ashamed. There's an associated stigma to disease and filth and laziness with the body. So you're less likely to go get help. Participants exposed to weight stigma have higher cortisol levels. How do you think that's going to impact their overall inflammation just by being ashamed of their weight? Keeping in mind, as you're going to hear in this clip, how that impacts blood sugar and gut reactivity. You haven't even eaten and you have high blood sugar because of the stigma. So you're going to the hospital, check your blood sugar to see if you have diabetes, and you do. Wanna why? Because you're inflamed because of the stress of stigma. Yet they're going to blame your food consumption because that's part of the stigma. They just assume you're lazy and incompetent. Some of the worst stigma most people experiencing, there's so many, I mean, I can keep on going, there's so many of these. Medical studies showing anti-fat bias, 39% in medical students. So there is again, thin supremacy is like 40% of the medical community believes in thin supremacy. So you can see first-year medical students are, carrying some of the most bias against people who have excess weight, not thinking that it might be coming from, the issues might be coming from actual thin supremacy. It's amazing. 76% of registered dietitians express moderate to high implicit weight bias. Yeah. How do you think that impacts people's overall sense of well-being? So I want to encourage all of you to question the weight bias out there, to question the stigma from the medical community that actually is part of the psychological promotion of these eating disorders that we've seen skyrocket over the course of the last decade, and how that impacts the physiology of the body of the person who's in fight or flight around being rejected and abandoned, and how we might be misdirecting a solution by saying you should restrict food when in fact we should stop attacking people based on ignorance around body fat and its vital necessity in the physiology of survival mode. And how when someone is in survival mode, how the body promotes fat gain for that reason, and to suggest it's because this person is lazy and dumb and lacks motivation and it's like you're treated as if you are a pariah. So we are talking about that in this session as she is trying to address her rheumatoid arthritis that is absolutely being magnified by her fight or flight response. So, all right, enjoy. Let's acknowledge that the way our brains work and the way our human perception work is sequentially. Okay. So this and that and this and that and this, that's a human perception of reality. Does that mean that everything works that way, or is that just how we perceive reality, right? So when you look at your health, you're looking at it in a sequential perception because that's the way we are. Is that the reality of how the body works? That's how our awareness works. Does the body work like that? Not at all. If it did, we wouldn't be alive, or we'd be a rock. We'd exist as a linear object, right? Because our consciousness works linearly. So the approach that's primarily been taken to human psychology, human physiology, is all sequential, because that's how our awareness works. Seems a little dumb, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're super dumb. We think that everything works the way our sequential thought processing works. We're so arrogant as a species that we think the entire universe works sequentially like our human mind.
I was going to say it's very arrogant.
Oh yeah, it is super arrogant. We're so into ourselves. We actually think the universe works like a human brain. This, then that, then this, then that, then this, then that. And that's one line of thinking, right? Just one way to think in each snap of a moment, not realizing that there's probably 360 degrees of all of that happening at one time on so many levels. And so that's how you're looking at this, which is understandable because you believe the concept that this causes that, not looking at the whole picture. And keep in mind, they're not addressing the fear-mongering that they do in that food, saying it's bad, it's threatening, it's going to kill you, and how that impacts your fight or flight response while you're eating it. Once again, what happens in the fight or flight response?
Yeah,
and
like
then,
I feel it right now.
Yeah, well, how's that working for you? Have you ever thought that maybe that is what is a huge support to your what's promoted the consequences or the current way your body's responding? Is it really the glucose in food? Is that really it?
No, it's the body's response, or the body's response to my fight or flight.
It's a whole big picture. It's like a big picture, right? How the body is in certain circumstances over millennia of evolution, and you're going to be told that it's because of the food that's in your body. Not, you see how like kind of dumb that is?
Yeah.
Wow, that one thing? But that's what they're selling you. It simplifies it so that it makes sense to the sequential thought process that we perceive, right? Not looking at, well, it's not just that one thing. That one thing wouldn't be so magnified. It wouldn't be so magnified if your whole nervous system wasn't on fire. On top of that, Michelle, when you're in that state of mind, when your brain and your perceptions perceive a threat, okay, because it doesn't have to be a real threat. It can be a perceived threat that we think is real, okay? And that's what we're talking about here. This isn't a real threat. It's a perceived threat because someone told you it was, and you said, you're right. You're a leader, and you can tell me what to do. It's called dogma, right? Not only does your blood go to the extremities to help you in case you need to run away, okay? It goes away from the gut, increased acid, and on top of that, there's a process to give the immediate muscles not just the oxygen they need to run from the bear, but it also breaks down energy inside the liver. It's called it's gluconeogenesis. So the body, it's amazing because it wants to give the body immediate energy. So it breaks down stored energy and puts glucose into your bloodstream. So you have high blood sugar, not because of the food. You don't even have to eat for this to happen. To make readily available energy for your body to run from the bear.
Which is what's happening to me right now.
Yeah, so you're diabetic, okay?
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with food. It just so happens to be that if you're living in fight or flight or constant survival mode, that you don't necessarily need as much food. And your body's not in a position to handle food because it's totally taken away it's what it's done is it's demoted the digestion as a priority. Digestion is the last priority right now. And not only that, but blood sugar is high to fuel your muscles. Doesn't that sound like the right thing to do if you had to run from a bear?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so that your body's not doing anything wrong. Should we keep on calling that unhealthy? Oh my God, you have something wrong with you. Well, is it really the body that's at fault here? Is it really diseased? Or should we look at your belief systems and your way of life? Is it your environment and the way you perceive it that's the problem? On top of the fact that you're keeping being told that it's the food. So you have high blood sugar, your gut isn't digesting properly, and you're shoving food down your face. Feeling like you're doing something wrong by eating the food. You know, it's just, you got to pull back and look at the big picture here and look at how look at your life and what you should be thinking about. Is it really about fearing the food? Should that be where you should put all of your effort right now? Is it if anything, you might want to be caution flammable with the diet industry and the health industry that's constantly blaming the food and not looking at our actual survival mode and how that's impacting your blood sugar and your gut and how that influences how your food consumption is working, on top of the primal need and urge to feed when you feel your food is being threatened. Continue and add more layers of shit.
I'm going to have to listen to this session a couple of times. I'm glad you're recording.
On top of all the stress hormones that are being released right now. Again, just put this into context to you think that food is the bear.
Yeah. You keep going back. Well, my RA doctor, face keeps flashing in my head and her saying, no matter how hungry you are, try not to eat the food.
That sounds like something really abusive.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay.
No matter how hungry you are.
I wasn't going to do that, but
so she's okay with your thyroid being problematic too.
Right.
She has no idea what she's suggesting.
Right.
I want you to consider the lack of, again, other ways to look at it. She's looking at it from one point of view, that it's about the food, not taking into account all these other things. She's not holding like 5 different to 10. I mean, there's way beyond even my concept of this, right? To sit there and say you should, when you're hungry, just starve. You should just starve. That sounds like she's judging you.
Yeah.
That really sounds like judgment to me.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I'm making an assumption, but I can't imagine looking at someone and saying, when you're hungry, do not eat. Okay. That's another way of saying starve yourself.
Yeah.
Starve. You need to starve. Okay. Is that something that you would teach anybody? Would you tell that to anybody?
No.
It just, you're highly sensitive to being manipulated because you actually believe what they're telling you. You actually believe it. So this whole time, Michelle, you have to keep in mind you never really let go of those beliefs.
Yeah.
More than likely, you were probably holding on to the hope that you would lose weight.
That sucks.
Well, it is what it is. If you can let it come out and open up about it, then you can address it, right? But why else would you be so affected by an abusive doctor telling you to starve yourself, not considering how that's going to impact the primal nature of how you relate to food as a human being?
Mm-hmm.
As a human being. She's completely unaware of that. She has no idea the ramifications of telling someone that, especially someone who suffered from an eating disorder.
Right.
I want you to be aware of how little was going into that suggestion.
I realize now I've been carrying that with me. I mean, when she said it, I thought I was just like, okay, and then let it go, but obviously I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you feel bad about what's going on. You feel bad. You feel bad. You feel there's something wrong.
Right.
So it would make sense that would impact you, right?
Yeah.
Again, I want you to keep in mind this whole concept of survival mode.
Yeah.
All I gave you were two, the gut and the energy source to the muscle symptoms. Hormones, testosterone, your adrenals, all of these other organs and the hormones that they're producing, how that affects your ovaries, how it's going to affect all these other things.